Okay, so that's us going live now. So we're live now, Sarah.
Okay, thank you. James, would you like to say what we're doing?
Okay, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to another instalment of our webinar series with Dr. Sarah Asher. Dr. Asher is a qualified chartered accountant, as well as an academic foundation doctor in the Oxford Deanery, and you've no doubt been following the entire series so far. Just a quick reminder before we get going, I will be monitoring the comment section on Facebook, so if you have any questions for Sarah or our guests from Wesleyan, please just comment on the video and I will relay them at the end of the talk, and hopefully we'll be able to get those answered for you. So as always, it's a great pleasure to hand over to Dr. Sarah Asher for our pensions talk. Sarah?
Thank you, James. Okay, hi everyone. I think this is our 7th installment. We're doing quite well, aren't we? So we're going to talk about the 2015 NHS pension scheme. Pensions are painful. So I've broken this down really simply, just because it took me a while to get my head around it. So feel free to ask lots of questions in the chat. James will be asking me those questions at the end and we'll answer them live. This webinar is going to be recorded, so you can watch this as many times as you like. And keep an eye out on www.mindthebleep/finance, and I will be putting an article as well, summarizing the webinar, but also providing some resources where you could find out more about the pension scheme. So what we're going to talk about in our webinar is what a pension is overall. We'll talk about types of pensions. I will explain some key terms that you might come across when you're discussing pensions. And then I'll just give you a very, very quick overview of how all of that applies to the 2015 NHS pension. Now, before we do that, we have an expert guest, Andy from Wesleyan, who actually manages and helps everyone, doctors and consultants with their pensions. He's going to give us a few words, and he'll be around for the questions as well. So do stay tuned.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Asher. I just thought I'd just spend about a minute just explaining who Wesleyan are. So we're effectively an organisation that provides financial planning to medics. The business break the advice down into hospital doctors, dentists, and GPs due to their specialism. And we provide financial planning, holistic financial planning across a whole range of areas, from providing mortgage advice to investments to supporting the NHS through to solutions in later life. As a business, we do genuinely have an insight into medics. We have an advisory board that provides information to us and helps us understand what's happening in your world. So we have a lot of Harvey and Kumar that feed into us on a regular basis to help shape the solutions and the advice we provide. The idea being is that if there is any forms of financial planning you need, we should be able to provide you exactly what you require, but also taking into consider everything to do with your role, your career, your pay, and all the sort of facets of being a doctor. So if there is anything anything that you do require moving forward, then of course we'd be happy to help, and I'll hang around to try and answer some questions if it's required. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. That's really kind. So we are just going to jump into it. This is me. We all know me by now. So just going to jump straight forward. What is a pension scheme? So there are lots of different pension schemes at the moment. And a pension scheme in a nutshell is when the employee, that's us, contribute a certain amount of our salary pre-tax into a pot. And then the employer will also contribute a certain amount of your pensionable salary into that pot. And because that money is being taken pre-tax, it's meant to be a tax efficient way to save for retirement. It means that you're not paying a higher level tax on the salary that you're making then. You'll be paying tax on it later as income, but it should be more tax efficient because you won't be hitting the higher tax thresholds until a bit later. That's a bit complex for me as well. I'm trying to explain it. So we will go over that. So that's what a pension scheme is overall. But there are currently 3 types of pension plans. 2 of them are kind of the same thing, but I'll break them down. So you have a defined contribution pension plan. You have a career average revalued earnings pension plan, which is what the NHS pension plan is. It comes under the defined benefit umbrella. And then the final salary is a different type of pension plan that also comes under the defined benefit umbrella. So we'll do the one that we're not first. A defined contribution pension plan. Now, these are now pretty much the most common across the private sector. It is literally a pension, a pot where the employee will contribute a certain amount of their salary. It's actually quite flexible what the employee can contribute. If they want, they can actually contribute more than the minimum amount that they're meant to. And the employer will also contribute a certain amount. All of that's put into a pot. And then that pot is invested by the pension provider to help the pot grow and hopefully beat inflation. And the employer will also contribute a certain amount. All of that's put into a pot. And then that pot is invested by the pension provider. And the employer will also contribute a certain amount. All of that's put into a pot. And then that pot is invested by the pension provider. And the employer will also contribute a certain amount. The pot is invested by the pension provider. Sorry, I did seem to have some tech issues there. Apologies for that. I have no idea how that happened. I'm not going to repeat myself. Basically, the pros of this is that if you'd like to have a larger pension pot, you can choose to make additional contributions. But the cons of this is it's not risk-free because the pot is being invested. And so the amount that your pension is worth can go up as well as down. The other issue with this is that the pot is finite. So once it's used up, it's used up. There isn't a sort of payment in perpetuity. Okay. So then we've got a defined benefit final salary. This is what the old pension schemes for the NHS were. They are largely being phased out because they are very generous and they aren't very common anymore. So this is when the amount of pension being paid after retirement reflected the amount of salary that the person was earning just before they retired. So if you retired with a really good salary, your pension was going to be really good for the rest of your retirement. There aren't really any cons to this. It was extremely generous and everybody loved it, which is why they got rid of it. And so now the one that we are on, the career average revalued earnings, it's now a type of defined benefit pension scheme. It's more or less limited to the public sector because private sector have moved on to defined contribution schemes. And it pays an annual pension amount based on an average of your earnings over the period of time that you have been contributing. The table that I'm showing here is how much of your salary you will be contributing over your career whilst you're working with the NHS. For us in F1, we will be contributing 9.3%. Now, the amount we contribute doesn't dictate what our annual benefit is. It's almost like we're paying a fee to be a member of this scheme, and the scheme will pay out what they've calculated based on our average earnings to be. So we'll be paying in 9.3% of our salary, and the NHS will be paying in 20.6% of our pensionable salary. And that will all go together into the scheme, and that will help to run the scheme and fund the scheme. It does not dictate what our benefit is at the end. What dictates our benefit at the end is our average pensionable salary over the time that we have been contributing into the scheme. And so that calculation is different. I haven't gone through the calculation. I can do if you'd like in the article. So just drop that in the comments if you'd like me to do that, but I've tried to keep things simple in this webinar. So the pros of this is it is safer. Your money is not being risked. It's more generous than the defined contribution schemes because the payments are made up until you die. It's not that it's a finite pot and once the money's gone, it's gone. And it also is valued based on inflation. So that's taken into account when calculating the value of your benefit. So the cons to this are that you have a fixed level of employee contributions, which means if you wanted to actually increase your pension pot value, you'd have to do so by accessing a defined contribution scheme, either via the same provider or a completely separate private one, which then those aren't as generous as this one. But that's not really that much of a con because you still have an excellent pension scheme, which you're contributing to appropriately and which is calculated based on your average earnings. And that's not going to be affected by how much you're actually contributing. So that's in a nutshell what the 2015 NHS pension scheme is. So some key words I wanted to talk to you about. These are things that will be mentioned in any explanation about the pension. So I thought I'd break it down what they were. So your pensionable salary is the number with which the calculation is made. And it's basically just your basic salary. It excludes any overtime, any out of hours work, any weekend premiere, all of that stuff. It doesn't include any of it. All it is your base salary. Next is your pension contribution. This is the amount that's deducted from your pre-tax salary, your gross salary, and it acts as a bit of a fee so that it means as long as you keep contributing that 9.3%, it means that you're part of the pension scheme and then that period of time counts as your service. And it has no bearing on your final pension value. And so an annual defined benefit, this is the amount that the calculation spits out to say this is how much you're going to be paid per year until you die. And that keeps changing as every year because it's revalued every single year. So over the time period, your salary will be increasing. Therefore, your annual defined benefit will slowly be increasing as well. And that's why we get the statement at the end on our ESR, which tells us what our annual defined benefit is at that point, and it will increase as we go further through our career. And then, so annual defined benefit and lifetime allowance, they're not specific to this scheme, they're just a generic term for pensions. And the government has set the lifetime allowance at the moment at £1,055,000 across the board, which means that if you have an NHS pension and a private pension, the total value of that pot can't be more than £1,055,000, or you will be taxed on any amount over that. The maximum value, it's the maximum value of your tax-free pension pot. And because the NHS pension scheme is calculated as an annual defined benefit, it's not calculated as a specific pot. The calculation that they use is 20 times your annual defined benefit at any one time. So if your annual defined benefit goes over £40,000, you will start to move closer and closer to your lifetime allowance. And then you need to be careful. I think the number is about £52,000, but I need to double check when you actually hit your maximum lifetime allowance. And at that point, anything that you're putting away above that is subject to a tax. I can talk a bit more about that if you'd like me to, again, in the article. So just put that in the chat. At the moment, I just want you to understand these things because they are just terms that will be used a lot when you're discussing pensions. So in a nutshell, what is the 2015 NHS pension scheme that you need to know when you're starting FY1? Basically, it's an employee contribution, 9.3% that you're making on your basic pay. It's a 20.6% contribution of your basic pay that the NHS makes as well. The contributions are taken pre-tax from your gross salary. It does not have any bearing on how much you're actually going to make at the end. It's only a way of keeping you in the scheme. and your retirement triggers the pension access, and your annual pension benefit, once you start drawing it down from your pension, will be taxed as normal income. So that is basically what your 2015 NHS pension scheme is. It's a little bit more. It's very generous. It's actually really, really good compared to the private sector. If you opt out, make sure you speak to someone like Andy from Wesleyan to have another plan for retirement, because you need to make sure that when you stop working, there's a way for you to make income. This scheme particularly is low risk because the money is not being invested. And it also has additional benefits, which I haven't actually discussed. And these include a lump sum payment to your family or dependents if you were to die in service. And there's an adult dependents pension and a children's pension as well. You can read about more about these on the BSA website, and I'm going to pop that in the resources for the article. But it's not only just your annual pension, it's also these additional benefits as well. So that is pensions in a nutshell for the NHS. Andy, did you have anything you wanted to add to that explanation before we went to questions?
I thought the explanation was great. I think one thing I would absolutely reiterate is that the scheme is exceptional. There obviously has been quite a lot of press coverage about the schemes changing over the years, from the 95 to the 2015 scheme, the accrual rates dropping. Taking it out, it is an exceptional scheme. And when I've done the calculations to work out how much I would need to pay into a private scheme to get the same level of return, and it's massive. So anybody opting out of the scheme would really need to think long and hard as to the reasons why, and there would be no reason in paying to any other private scheme. Really, the scheme is second to none. And like you say, the key point that you raised there is the fact that the money's not invested. If you look at the recession, if you go back to April 2020, when lockdown started, the FTSE dropped 35% in a month. So if you've got your money in a unit-linked investment pension scheme, a defined contribution scheme, your investment value could have dropped significantly so. Whereas with the NHS pensions, a guarantee, it's a promise to pay that the NHS will pay you once you get to retirement, as long as you live. So if you live until 100, it will pay you an indexed, inflationary rised pension over that period of time. So there is absolutely no risk. So the point you made, Dr. Asher, is absolutely key. Exceptional scheme, no risk, fabulous benefits, and something that I think more and more companies will move away from. You made the point earlier that not many companies offer this in the private sector. The simple reason is that it's just too expensive to administer. So the fact that people have access to this is great, and I would certainly encourage anybody who's maybe on the fence to pay into the scheme.
That's absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much. That's exactly my thoughts as well, and it's really reassuring to know that is generally the consensus as well. So please do give us feedback, and I have realized I haven't been putting my contact details up, so I have now put my contact details up. So if you'd like to get in touch with me, do contact me at finance@mindthebleep.com. I look at that email every day, pretty much 3 times a day. So I will get back to you if you have any questions, but I will pass it over to James now to tell us if we have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah and Andy. I'm finally starting to feel slightly more positive about the financial side of being an F1 this year, so that's something. We've got loads of questions coming in.
Fabulous.
And by all means, Andy, if you want to jump in as well. But
Yeah, of course.
okay, so first question came in from Raghavrenda. Husband and wife working in the NHS, is it worth for them to both be in the pension scheme, or for one to opt out of the scheme and invest elsewhere?
I'm happy to pick that one up. So the merit of both of them being in the scheme is, one, they're essentially benefiting from an incredibly strong pension scheme. They're both benefiting from contributions being taken out of their pay pre-tax, so that's a tax benefit. And in terms of later on in life and retirement, they're both going to build a pension up which will make use of their income tax allowances as well. So it would make absolute sense for them both to pay it. In terms of choosing for one of them to choose to then go and pay into an alternative, there isn't really any alternatives out there that can match it, because if you're going to pay into a private pension scheme, you're then losing the employer contribution that's going towards the growth or the increase in pension that you would get from the NHS. So an external pension scheme wouldn't match, an ISA wouldn't match the rate of return, because the money is already taxed once it's been invested into the ISA. So my view is, and I've got lots and lots of doctors that or couples that are both doctors, for both of them to pay into the scheme, both of them to benefit from the potential growth, the tax benefits, and the retirement income.
I completely agree with that as well. It's such a fantastic scheme. It would be really, you'd have to have a real windfall in your investment to really match the level that the 2015 scheme would give you.
I think the other thing as well is that Dr. Ash, you mentioned earlier that there's obviously benefits that are aligned to the pension scheme. One of those is the death in service benefit. So if you are a member of the NHS pension scheme, you benefit from a death in service benefit, which is twice your superannuated or pensionable pay. If you become a deferred member or you don't join the scheme, then you lose the benefit. So there's an awful lot more to the pension scheme than just the pension in isolation. You've got death and service benefits. You've also got something called ill health retirement pension. So as you grow or as you move through your career and your pension grows, your spouse, your children will benefit from an ill health retirement pension. But that ill health retirement pension is broken down into two tiers. Tier 1, which is payable if you're unable to do your own job. So if you're a cardiologist and you can't continue doing that role due to illness, it would potentially pay out. And then there's tier 2, which is for more severe illnesses. But if you opt out of the NHS pension scheme, then the wording changes from being unable to do your own job to being unable to do regular work. So the way I look at that is that you're losing a benefit, because unable to do your own job versus any work is completely different. So there's a lot more to the pension than just the actual pension retirement income.
Thank you. I had no idea about the second one. That's really interesting.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hopefully that answers your question. The next one here is from Janice. And she says that she's confused as to what will happen at age 58 and a half when it transfers to the 2015 scheme, and that she is looking to retire at 60.
Depends how old Janice is now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the point you make is valid. So if I suspect what Janice is referring to is that the pension scheme had a phased period of transition from the old 95 scheme to the 2015 scheme, and it depended on how old you were in 2012 as to when you would migrate from the 95 scheme into the 2015 scheme. So I suspect what she's referring to is that as of 58 and a half, she'll move from being in the old 95 scheme, which allows her to retire at 60, and move into the 2015 scheme, which is then linked to state retirement. So I think the question probably needs a bit more of a discussion in terms of the impact to her. But ultimately, the difference in the schemes is that one element of the scheme is just going to mean that she would need to either leave that money until state retirement, or if she decided to take it all out at the same time, it would just mean that she would take an actuarial reduction for taking that money earlier out the scheme. But that's probably the sort of conversation that a one-to-one meeting would require, just because of the complexity and the level of discussion required.
Yeah, completely agreed. I think that's something very individual, and I understand it's quite frustrating. It's not very clear, but actually planning for that might be very, very important. We're talking about large numbers here in terms of money. So do contact Wesleyan if that helps you.
Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully that's helpful, Janice. And yeah, do get in contact if you need some further assistance with that. Just scrolling down, and we have another question from Jazzy, who says, hello, thanks for the webinar. What happens to the pension or the money that you put in if you end up training or living elsewhere?
So sorry, Andy, I think if
No,
please go ahead with this one. Mine was going to be more of a guess from what I've read, but you probably know better.
Yeah, so the NHS pension, essentially the benefit will build up. So if let's say you've had 5 years of service and you've had pension growth over that 5-year period, if you then decide to move abroad, and I've got clients that do this, then the pension benefit will remain available, and that pension benefit can still be taken at retirement for that individual wherever they are. They'll obviously have the opportunity to then crystallise a pension here and then have money transferred abroad. Alternatively, there is an option where they could, so if they decide to go to Australia as an example, they could go to Australia, they decide to settle there, they'd have 2 choices as to whether to take the income from the pension here and crystallise it in the UK, or they could speak to a local advisor in the country for which they're moving to, Australia in that example, and that advisor could look at the merits of transferring the scheme from the NHS to a scheme abroad. They do something similar in the UK where money's come in. It's a very complex process, more so because the NHS pension scheme has so many benefits and so many guarantees. But that would be a discussion with an advisor in the country that they would be moving to as to whether it would be more beneficial to leave the funds here or to move it abroad. But ultimately, there is no risk to them in the sense that the money isn't lost if they decide to go abroad.
Can I ask a quick question? That am I right in thinking that once you leave the NHS pension scheme, yes, it does remain there for you to access later on, but you do lose those additional benefits of the death in service benefit?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, so that's a really good point. So you do lose the death in service benefit and things like the ill health retirement pension. Wording changes from unable to being able to do your own job to being unable to work. So the benefits are watered down for deferred members.
Thank you very much. And then I have a question from Gokul. Do we get notified, or is there some way to check how much that we have contributed so far? So kind of, do we receive a notification, for example, if we're about to cross the total lifetime pot limit?
So if you have access to your ESR, you'll have a benefit statement that you're able to look at. It's at the bottom, you scroll down. And then your pay slips will tell you how much you've been contributing each month as well. Andy, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, the ESR gives you access to the total reward statement, and the total reward statement is the obligation that the NHS pension have to provide you information. So historically, what used to happen is they never gave you anything. You'd have to phone up and then have a paper statement sent out, and then it evolved. So you can now log in. When you log into it, it will give you a tab which will be entitled 2015, and under that tab, it will tell you what your pension will be worth yearly as an income, and it will then provide some further information, but the key bit you need to know is how much is that pension going to be worth now. It doesn't generally give a forecast. It's normally looking at that particular point in time. So the current statements are valid up until 31st of March 2020. The other point to consider is in terms, and this isn't an issue for an F1, an F2, or anyone in core medical training. This is only something that they need to start considering once they hit consultancy. The annual allowance, which is the amount that you can pay into your pension yearly, is 40,000. If you go over that, there is a potential tax charge, and you may get a statement from the NHS, but also the NHS pensions are notorious for not sending the statements out and not making people aware. So once you get to a consultancy, or once you reach consultant level, good practice is to contact NHS Pensions and ask for your annual allowance statement. You can have it every year. It's part of the service that they must provide, and that will give you a breakdown of how much has been paid, or sorry, how much growth you've had on your pension in isolation for the current year and the previous 3 years. So I think for me, the best thing to be doing is at the early stages before consultant, monitor your pension level by going through the ESR to get the total reward statement. Once you get to consultant, then you should be getting your annual allowance statement yearly to make sure that you've not exceeded that. And if so, then that's obviously where we come in to talk to you about methods of or ways in which to deal with that potential tax charge.
Okay, cool, thank you. And can I just check that my understanding is correct and just reiterate a point if it is correct? When you cross that threshold and are taxed, the entire amount is taxed, isn't it? It's not just like income tax where the amount that you've gone over the threshold is taxed. It is your entire pension pot. Is that correct?
Okay, so if we're talking, so there's two things here. So if you look at lifetime allowance, the lifetime allowance is set at a level. If any amount over that is then taxed at an additional tax rate. So if let's say, I don't know, let's say the pension level is $1 million and you go to 1.1 million, anything over $1 million is taxed at an additional 25% on the lifetime allowance. And that's the tax charge that refers to the total amount you can pay into your pension. The yearly one refers to an amount of 40,000. If you go over the 40,000, it's the amount over your tax. So if your limit's 40, your input for the year is 50, you're 10 over, you're then going to get that 10,000 taxed at your marginal rate. So for a 40% taxpayer, the tax charge in that example would be 4,000.
Okay, cool, thank you. That makes more sense. Appreciate that. Okay, so then back to the questions that we have coming in. Another one from Jazzy. What happens when you're working as a locum, say in an F3 year? Does that mean that that year would not really count towards your pension as it's locum work?
I understand that your locum salary does not get pension, is not taxed, is not pensionable. But I don't know if that means you're also out of the pension scheme or if it's a break.
Yes, I think it depends. If you do an FY3 and you decide to go through an agency, then clearly the agency is a separate entity, so there's going to be no pension contribution. If you decide to do an FY3 and you get a contract or you do bank work, I think in some cases, I think you can ask for your contributions to be pensionable. It depends on the circumstances. I mean, ultimately, if you're going for an agency, then you would just be a deferred member for 12 months because you won't be paying into it, but you can go back into the scheme and start up once you go into core medical training as an ST1. I think if you're doing work through the hospital, I've got clients, I'm sure I've done locum work, but I've been able to pension it. I think it just depends on the circumstances.
Okay,
Again, I think that would be a thing to contact Wesleyan about in more detail, wouldn't it? Because of just how complicated it would be to arrange that.
Yeah, the next question actually follows on from that. So if you were to go and work in a different country for a couple of years, so similar to locum work, and then return to the NHS, what happens to your pension scheme? Yeah,
so in that example, so let's say someone decides they do FY1 and FY2, they've got 2 years contributions, they decide to then go work in Australia for 2 years, so the pension would basically remain dormant. It's not going to get any further growth because you're not paying into the scheme. Someone comes back after 2 years and then goes back into an ST1, ST2, they would automatically, the NHS have got a responsibility to enrol them under the auto enrolment rules set by the government some years ago. So they would automatically enroll into the scheme, and then the scheme would just continue to start to rise and grow based on the scheme rules at the time.
It
So
would
there's
just
no
not count
loss.
as 2 years, right? It would deduct
Sorry?
the 2 years. The 2 years of service would be deducted. The 2 years of not having.
Well, if you think about it with the career average reevaluated earnings, effectively the way it's working is that you're getting 1/54th of your income every year. So the way I tend to explain it is that if you think about it, in year one, if you were at 100,000 and you had 1/54th go in, it works out something like 1,830 goes into a pot. The second year, you get the same amount going into a pot, and then year one, you get inflation applied to it. So once if you then leave the NHS, those two pots remain and nothing happens to them. For the next 2 years, you're working abroad, there's no contribution going into the scheme. And then in year 5, when you come back to the UK, then you would then have your next pot of income, 154 paid into the pension scheme, and so on and so forth. One of the benefits of the career average reevaluated earnings scheme is that it is taking an average of your earnings over a period of time. One of the problems with the old final salary schemes is that they worked on the best in the final 3 years of retirement. So in some cases, some people could be penalised if they ended up working less towards retirement, whereas this scheme is a much fairer scheme. And the accrual rate's a lot better, I should add as well. So there's no real negative other than the fact that you're going to lose 2 years of pension contributions, but the contributions that you've already paid into won't be affected.
Perfect. Thank you. So you kind of just carry on from where you left off.
Yeah.
Ideal. Hopefully that answers your question, Dominique. Next question is from Saloni. Is there anything that can stop you from receiving the NHS pension after retirement? So, for example, if you have a significant amount in savings.
No, I think your pension scheme is it's your pension. You'll make that you've been promised by the NHS that is what you're going to be paid annually from when you retire. There should be no reason why you wouldn't receive your pension scheme, as far as I know.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think what they're referring to is that some government benefits are means tested, so the benefit may be reduced or unavailable if there is some sort of savings level over a particular amount. But these are, benefits that are provided to people that are either out of work or are disabled or something akin to that. You're absolutely right. There's no reason in my mind pension should be reduced for anything related to that. Like you say, if you work 40 years, you've got 40 years of service, and the benefit will provide you that income until you pass away.
Okay, perfect. And then Tom asks, is there a online calculator where you can work out roughly the amount that you would get per year for your pension post-retirement?
That absolutely is, and I will be providing a link to it in the article, so keep an eye out for that. There are actually a few you can get, so I'll put a few on there, see which one you find the most useful for you, but they're quite quick to use. Yeah,
and again, I'd encourage that, because you can really get a good idea of what your pension income will be worth in retirement, and it is surprising how much the pension scheme pays out. And like I said, comparing that with a private scheme, and when you take into account investments, volatility, the risk associated to it, it's an exceptional scheme, and you can see the benefit that you're going to get, and something where nobody can take it away. It's a promise to pay, but you'll have that income in retirement for the rest of your life.
Pull up the next question. So the next one is from Michelle, and she says, you mentioned that the NHS pension benefit will pretty much remain the same even if we end up living elsewhere, but how do we prove that we are retired and get the fund back? And is it possible to get the fund back if we stop working before the retirement age? Does that make sense?
Okay, so that's a great question. So, so how do you? Okay, so in terms of proving you're retired, so first and foremost, the pension is governed by retirement rules. So the 2015 scheme is linked to state retirement. So state retirement obviously dictates when you can take the scheme. So if you're in your 30s, then, or you're a student or in FY1, then at the moment it's 68. It could even be later than that. So you would need to, when you get to retirement, and this isn't something you need to remember, but you'll need to complete what's called an AW8 form. And the AW8 form asks for lots of questions about you, your details, you need to provide ID, various other bits. So they would verify your retirement at that stage. So what was the second bit of the question?
So the second bit was, so if you stop working before the retirement age, okay, you covered that part. So it's a bit before. How do we prove that you're retired?
Yeah, it's a bit about retiring before, or retiring before. So you can, the NHS pension schemes allow you to take a pension before the standard retirement age. So the standard retirement age is, let's say, 68. You can take it before that, but then they apply an actuarial reduction. So they essentially take money off you by taking the pension either a year, 2, 3, 4 years before. So you can do it. There are rules related to that. You just need to be mindful that the earlier you take it, the less you will get as a result.
Hopefully that's answered Michelle's questions there. Another question from Saloni. Andrew mentioned about being able to move the funds from the scheme abroad. Is this possible with any country, or can there be certain restrictions?
I'll be honest, I don't know. So it would depend on the country that you go to as to what their pension regulations are, their pension processes, as to whether it could be transferred to another country. So I don't want to be vague, but I'm not sure on that, because like I said, it would be dependent on the country they go to.
And it would also depend on whether they actually ran those pension schemes or not, and how protected they were. So if you're going to a country that's relatively like the UK, and it works in a similar way, that's fine, like Australia, for example. But if you're going abroad and you're going to a country that doesn't have the same sort of infrastructure in place, you could be putting your pension at risk as well.
Great point.
Yeah, interesting. I actually saw a similar question about this on Reddit today, and the answers were very similar, other than just definitely get a financial advisor and for your specific situation and which country you're going to.
So we have one more question. The rest I will go through and answer in the chat, because I understand Angie's giving up his time for free for us, which is really
No, that's all right, it's fine.
So yeah, if we could just have one more.
Okay, so I'm having a look at the last two questions and seeing if either of them have kind of been answered before. Okay, if you complete your GP training after 3 years, then go to live abroad, would you still get your pension at retirement age? So you never come back to the NHS, you just kind of go off, and then when you hit, say, 68, 70, whatever the retirement age is, do you then claim your pension back from the UK?
Yes.
Yeah, same principle, the same. So if you did FY1, FY2, 3 years as a VTS, you've done 5 years service, the pension would still be available. It would just, you would just need to make the judgment call as to whether you take it here or you decide to transfer it elsewhere, based on some of the points Dr. Ash has raised as well as to, you know, what you decide to do. But it would be available.
Okay, thank you. And there's only one more question. Can you squeeze it in? Again, on a similar vein to stuff that we've already talked about, if you decide it's best for you to leave the NHS pension scheme, but later decide to rejoin, aside from not being able to link the two different pots together, do you lose many benefits?
I think if you actually opt out, you can't rejoin it, as far as I'm aware. Is that right?
No, I mean, we do. I mean, I've had clients in the past that have opted out. I think if you opt out of some of the older schemes, so say the 95 scheme for a particular number of years, then you wouldn't be able to, you weren't able to return to it. But with the 2015 scheme, and being the 2015 scheme is now the dominant scheme, then you can rejoin the scheme. I've even had clients that have been out of medicine for quite a number of years that have come back in and can join the scheme. Because again, if you look at the pension rules, the wider pension rules under auto enrolment, when an employer joins an organisation, the government required that employer to enrol that individual within a certain time frame. The individual then has an opportunity to then unenroll themselves, but the employer must enrol them into the scheme.
I think in the context that I read, say you joined as an F1, you said you didn't want to do the 2015 scheme and you opted out, but you continued working for the NHS. And then about 5 years' time, you changed your mind and thought, actually, I'd rather like to go back. But you've been working for the NHS for that period of time. I understand you can't enroll back in. You'd have to almost leave the NHS and then come back in to be enrolled again.
I'm not sure. I mean, My understanding is that somebody can go back into the scheme at any time. It may have been a complication to do with some of the older schemes, 2008, 95, but I'm not aware that they wouldn't allow you to rejoin the scheme.
Okay.
And like I said, the difficulty is that, well, sorry, not the difficulty, but looking at the wider government pension rules around the auto enrolment, if they came back into the NHS, they'd have to be automatically enrolled as part of that ruling. I'll try and I will. Let me. If someone leaves that with me, I'll look into that tomorrow if you like.
Yeah, thank you. I'll do the same as well, and I can just update the article with the answer to that one. Thank you for that. That's a really good question. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, guys. There's been loads of great questions coming in. And as soon as I said no more questions, or you guys said no more questions, more have started coming in. But I will pass those on to you guys later, and hopefully they'll either be answered in the article or we can reply to stuff on Facebook.
Definitely.
But that's been a really interesting and informative talk, and the Q&A is like, you can tell it's definitely a difficult topic for everyone. I mean, yeah,
It's hard.
there's lots of discussion there, and it's not easy. Just before we wrap up, I'd just like to remind everyone, please do give us some feedback. We've actually had some really good responses for the last few weeks, but the links are posted in the comments. Just take 5 minutes, tell us what was useful, what was not, how we can improve it. We do really appreciate when you guys take the time to do that. And then Saira and Andy, is there anything you want to add before we finish?
I just wanted to say thank you, Andy. I've actually learned a lot this evening, and it's been really, really useful having you on here. The quality of this webinar definitely went through the roof when you joined us, so thank you.
No, and thank you for allowing us to sort of come on board. And if there's anything like this coming up in the future, and you feel that we can provide some further support, we're more than happy to sort of jump in. I've really enjoyed this evening, so yeah, thank you very much.
Fabulous, thank you. Well, everybody have a lovely evening. Thank you so much for joining us, and yeah, good night.